Yeah, so first, thanks for having me. And as the title says, I will tell you what you need to know about Maven 4. First, few words about me. I'm Matthias Bünger. I'm a software developer, team lead, whatever, at the financial government. And in my spare time, I'm a Maven committer. You reach me on Mastodon and Blue Sky, theoretically also on LinkedIn, but don't expect any activity there. Except you wanted to write me messages about getting the organized meetings like today. Before we start, obvious question, what Mavens are you using like in production, so not on your local machine to test something? Who's using Maven 3.8? Nobody? Kind of. 3.9? Majority, that's good. Something else like older, like 3.6? Okay. 3.3? Maven 2? You might laugh, but looking at the download numbers of Maven 2, it's actually used quite a lot, so it's a little bit scary. Everybody who's not using 3.9 should considering updating, not only because of Maven 4, but because everything else lower than 3.8 is out of support, or as the Maven community can support, and 3.8 will be soon. So, what about we talking or looking at today? Motivation for Maven 4, major changes, then minor changes, or what I call them improved user experience, then how to migrate projects to Maven 4, and a first glance at Maven 4.1. Yeah, even 4.0 is not released yet. Okay, current state of Maven. Maven is more than 20 years old. First major release in 2004. If you take considering the beta versions, then it's more than 25 years. Maven itself is not only the Maven application, which literally only runs a life cycle, but consists of tools inside and plugins, and everything what's maintained from the Maven team, literally about 100 artifacts. If you're like Sandra and me, who's also a Maven committer, and you have to do maintenance work on all of the 100 repositories, you know how many there are. And what we're not counting are around about 6,000 community plugins, so it's huge. And the last major version, 3.0, was released 15 years ago, and current minor versions or bug fix version is 3.9.11 from July. So you should use 3.9, some version of that. Because in 3.9, a lot of things are developed with the scope for Maven 4. So everything which works on 3.9 should work on 4. Just as a basic understanding that we know that we're talking about the Maven POM as we know it today, or better call the model version 4.0.0. It's a schema from Maven since 2005. And it consists all the information we need for the build, like the modules, dependency, plugin configuration, repositories. But it's also used by projects which are just consuming our library or whatever. And it's obviously deployed to Maven Central, so projects who want to use our library or whatever can read this information, especially about dependencies. So with this schema, which is backwards compatible since 2005, changing the POM is one thing Maven wants to do, or the Maven team wants to do, to improve the structure of it or to improve new elements. And also a thing Maven wants to improve is get rid of some old redundant code or problematic code, like the API developed 15 years ago was not or allows plugin developers more than they should do, because the API was not this close as it should be, or even unclear, like the API boundaries. So many plugins developed 10, 15 years ago still use methods which are deprecated since the early days of Maven 3, because the API allows it. And Maven, like the JDK team, puts in high effort to be backward compatible. So that's a good reason where the team wants to improve Maven to yeah, to be able to focus more on maintaining Maven instead of maintaining backwards compatibility for plugin developers who don't want to upgrade their plugins. Yeah, and obviously Maven want to also use modern Java versions. So, but the Maven team has one problem. Maven is not just a tool, it's more than that. I mean, of course, we have Maven, but we also have the Maven Central developed by the Maven team 25 years ago, where all the dependencies, artifacts developed by, or deployed are stored, and files which shouldn't belong there, but that's another story. But the whole ecosystem around Maven or the Maven Central is there are other build tools like Gradle, Ivy, and others, and of course all the IDEs. So if you just go there, okay, we changed the IDE, the POM XML, all this breaks. Obviously, right? Because all the tools have to adopt a new POM XML, or the other build tools have adopt the POM XML because it's stored on Central. And what about old artifacts that are already deployed? Can you get back to the people, hey, here, we need a new POM update from you because the POM XML changed? Won't happen. So this is a problem the Maven tool was facing, the Maven team was facing when considering, okay, we want to involve in the POM XML, or as Heavy, which is the PMC chair or the team leader of Maven, wrote some years ago, with the Maven build schema preserved in Ember, we can't evolve much. We will stay forever with Maven 3 minor releases, unable to implement improvements that we imagine will require seriously updating the POM schema, even because of the ecosystem. So, but Maven 4 will tackle this problem and clear the way to a future where it's possible to change the POM without breaking the ecosystem. The change which will happen there is quite small, but when you only look from the outside, but from the inside it's huge. So, what will change in Maven 4? Small disclaimer here, still release candidate 4, so literally things can change. The chance that they will change, let's say it's very, very small, because I have serious sources that say final or general JA final release will most probably release very, very, very soon. So.
As we talk about 2 years, since 2 years.
Yeah, but I just got the confirmation today. He's preparing it next week. So you are more or less the first people who hear it. So the biggest change in breaking change in Maven 4 is that you need Java 17 as a requirement Java version to run Maven. I can't emphasize this slide enough, because even nowadays, after 25 years of Maven, many developers think, okay, the JDK I run Maven with must be the same, or is the same JDK my application is compiled against. This is not true and was never true. The Java version you want to compile your application against, you set in the compiler plugin. And with a Java 17 JDK, you can compile back up to Java 7. And even if this is not enough, because, I don't know, you want, or you have to use the, I don't know, old IBM JDK, for example, then you can make use of toolchain plugins to especially use another JDK. So the Java 17 is required to run Maven, not your app. Which comes with a new Java version, of course, code updates. Why do I put here continues to updating to Java 8? Because the vote to Java 17 was in spring last year. Even before the lift to Java 8 was only 2 years earlier, or from last year, 1 year earlier. So the core is constantly updated to Java 8 and beyond. And it's not a task, especially with the small team Maven is, which you do, okay, now let's have a weekend and update everything to Java 17. That's not possible. So every time a developer is in a code place where he thinks, okay, I can make use of a new Java language feature, then he might introduce it or not. And of course, new major version means updating default versions of plugins, dependencies, whatever. And of course, this also means API cleanups, not only removing the old Maven 1 and 2 plugin API to a new API. Sandra could give a talk about that. If you're a plugin developer yourself, then you should check your plugins on running on Maven 3.9, because there's some compatibility layer already in, and it gives you warning that your plugin may break in Maven 4.0. And the model behind the plugin is now immutable. That's one thing the Maven team was annoyed 25 years long, because plugin developer could literally change the model of Maven internals. And this was never a desired case, but as the boundaries was not clear, it was possible. To give you an example about dependencies which are removed is the Plexus dependency resolver, which is deprecated since Maven 3.2 or since 2010, and it's still used, to be honest, even in some Maven plugins, because we can't update them all in one place. But this is just an example of dependency which are already deprecated, and you still see plugins popping up using this. Yeah, that's the Java side of the update. That's the introduction of a consumer POM is the second large feature or change of Maven 4. A consumer POM, or what you know about the Maven POM, is a build POM, because it contains all the build information and some information a consumer needs. But what Maven 4 now does is produce a consumer POM, which contains information focused on the consumer and independent of the build. And that's the easy looking but hard to develop solution for the problem I solved. Because with the consumer POM, which is generated on model version 4.0, the ecosystem, with all the tools in the ecosystem, can rely on the same POM they know since years. Independent from that, Maven 4 introduced a build POM with a new version, and as a first step towards evolving this POM, introduce new things. So literally, as an image, you have your repository, you have your build POM as you know it in, let's say, the new version 4.1. During the build, a rich POM is generated, and this also happens now, because all the dependency are resolved, properties are filled with their values and whatever. And at the end of the build now, a consumer POM is generated with the reduced model of 4.0, and this is also deployed to Maven Central. To have a small comparison about this, build POM in the new version, consumer POM in the old version, they contain the full dependencies of third parties, because this is still needed. It does not consist dependencies of your project own dependencies. In a consumer POM, you don't need it, because Maven resolves this during the build, and you only have an artifact at the end. But you also don't need it in your build POM anymore. I'm coming back to this. Then properties are not part of the consumer POM, because you only need them for your build. Same with plugin configuration. You only need those configuration for your build. A consumer doesn't need them, because the consumer can't do anything with them except looking at them. Other things like profiles, repository information are in both POMs at the time. You could think about if this should stay this way, or if some information should be erased from the consumer POM, but this discussion is not taking place at the moment, because the important parts are these one, and that's what the Maven team was focusing on. Small disclaimer, all what I've told about the consumer POM is obviously not true for artifacts of the type POM, because POMs are artifacts for the build and not consuming POMs in like, I want some information or some methods from it. And set with Maven 4, model version 4.1 comes or is introduced. We have one changed name element. Modules, as you know them, are now called subprojects. Story about this is it was never clearly defined what are modules. And if you talk to your colleagues or your friends, I have a module in my system or in my artifact. Is it a logical module? Is this a subproject in terms of Maven? Is this a Java platform module system module? Especially the introduction of the later one in Java 9 literally made this whole discussion, what is a model, even more confusing. So the team decided, okay, we have Maven projects, so align the names of them and call them subproject. So small change, the model 4.1 introduced a new element called subproject, but to be backwards compatible and make it easier for project to move to Maven 4, the old modules tag is still there, but deprecated. Another time is introduction a new packaging time called BOM, so for bill of materials, because there's always the discussion using type POM for build information, what's actually should be in the POM or must be in the POM. So bill of materials, which have to be type POMs in Maven 3. To make this distinction more clearly, a new packaging type is introduced. If you want an introduction or example for this, Karl-Heinz, one of the Maven PMCs, gave a talk and example on the IntelliJ IDA conference last year. I give you the slides at the end or tomorrow, and you can check the link, especially at the second the example starts. And something users want for years are alternate POM syntax, like why are you still using XML or why are you using XML at all? There are good reasons for doing so, because XML, for example, is not only readable by humans and machines, but also you can validate it against a schema, which you, as I know, can't do against anything else. Even JSON schema is not final, because the team which developed the JSON schema got drafts, several, and at some point they hit a wall and said, okay, we can't finish it. So as far as I know, XML is the only format that allows schemas. So and that's a big point why the team says, okay, we stay on XML. But people want to use other declarations like YAML. They want to shoot themselves on the foot. Okay, with Maven 4 they can do that because Maven introduced a parser SPI, which allows custom syntax, and two of the Maven PMC chairs, Thomas and Guimont, already did this in a Maven extension called Mason for supporting YAML, JSON, TOML, and HOCON. You can check this link to get examples, and so if you want to define your project in JSON, you can do it, for example, by this extension. But you can also write your own extension for, I don't know, support PHP, chicken, whatever there is. So that are the 3-4 major changes. Improved user experience or minor changes. A lot more, obviously, but not that impactful or breaking. The biggest and most important thing, I think, here on the user side, which makes the developer life a lot easier, are reactor improvements. The reactor is the part of Maven which handles dependency resolution and how your project is built internally, like in which order your sub-project have to be built so that the information are there for all the other sub-projects. And most of you, I guess, were at some point in your developing career at the point where you have a project with two sub-projects, let's call them A and B, and the second one, B, is dependent of A. And if you build that and declare the dependency, it's all fine. But let's take the situation: A is built successfully, and while during the build of the second submodule, an error occurs. Then Maven tells you, like, okay, fix the error and then run this command. And if you do exactly this, the build fails again because Maven can't find the dependency of A. I see some knocking ears. Okay, you know the situation. Yeah, you can use additional parameters to tell Maven, hey, you know that you should know that I need the other module because I have declared it in my dependency. Yeah, this is obviously a bug. It's a bug since Maven 2, so 15 years and older, and it's finally fixed. So this is only one, but I think a situation most people know, or most developers know, which is fixed on improvement. Other improvements in this field are that Maven has a better recognition of sub-projects. You literally don't have to declare your sub-projects if you leave the list totally empty, but keep the default Maven folder structure with POM.xml files in the folder. Then Maven 4 also recognizes, oh, this is a sub-project and can build this. And if you build this multiple level deeps, the reactor can handle it far more better. So a small thing on the surface, but yeah, it makes situations like, Maven, I'm doing what you're telling me, and that you break again. So this shouldn't happen in any tool. Similar thing, Maven 4 introduced a project local repository. What does that mean? If you have a project with, let's call it again, with multiple sub-projects, and you run a Maven install or a build, the sub-projects which are built are proposed to your local user repository and therefore are available for all other projects. So you're literally polluting your user repository, which is literally only a copy of Maven Central or your company-wide artifact repository, with dependencies or with archives which are not released yet because you're just building and developing them. And even if, or similar, or especially if this happens when you run Maven install, like a lot of tutorials tell you, you get the same effect. Especially then you get an error, yeah, and then I have a strange version with non-compiling code somewhere deployed there. So there are memes and advices to never run Maven clean install. And yes, I would say you should think about if you do this. Let's have a look at it. Maven verify, this is the phase before install or 2 phases before install in the lifecycle, is in general enough for your regular builds where you want to check if your build is correct, if you run test run. Maven install, as shown in the slide before, or 2 slides before, is somehow, with install you're deploying or publishing your artifacts in your user repository and to everything else. And yes, there are cases to use install. For example, if you developing a library you want to use in another project, or you're developing a meta POM for your company or for your team, obviously you have to install them in your user local in your user repository to consume it with other projects.
One question. I also need to insert here with
With the project local repository, it's just literally the repository inside your build folder. Maven 4 is aware of them and just uses this and finds the dependencies there. But they are not installed for the install plugin or deployed in the deploy phase outside of the project build folder. On this side, also the default values for install at end or deploy at end are now set to true, which literally means that only install or deploy them if the whole build was successful, and not if the build of one sub-project was successful, then install or deploy these just built sub-projects regardless of all other sub-projects which are still in the line.
This is something you would do in like a multi-repo, the one before, like in one repo, for example.
Yeah, exactly. So, and always think about if you really want to clean your target folder, because many people argue Maven is so slow because it always does build everything from the sketch again. Yeah, if you tell them to do it, Maven doesn't behave like differently from other tools. If you say Gradle, throw away everything, then Maven Gradle also builds from the scratch. So, and if you use, for example, the build cache extension or Maven daemon, which has caching possibilities, if you say these tools throw away everything before you start, then there is nothing to cache. So, in general, you don't want to use clean anything. So think about what do you want to achieve with your build, and in general, Maven verify is enough. And if you want to learn more about these repository structure and what is used when, Thomas has wrote a very interesting but very technical article about this. So don't read it before you want to go to bed, because it has some technical thoughts or details you have to think about. So it's not just okay, I read it before going to bed. Another thing I personally like, which is introduced in Maven 4, is that we have a clear definition now to define the project root folder from your project. There is no value or a variable or property in Maven 3 for that. There are some internals that are misused for this. But if you want to point to, for example, a config file in your root directory, or starting from there, you have now these three properties in Maven 4. The project root directory is defined by either having a .mvm folder or setting a new attribute, which is introduced in model version 4.1, the root attribute. Then Maven recognizes, okay, this is my root folder, I'm starting from here. Obviously, if you neither have this directory or set this attribute to true, the value is not defined, so you don't have a value for this property. The same is the same for the session root directory. What's the difference of project and session? Project is literally your POM, and session is literally the actual build process. And that's the difference to session top directory, which is the current directory you started your Maven build, or which you pointed to, or which you tell Maven via the file argument, okay, the project you should build is in this path. And because this is always defined, you always have a value in this property. And as already said, there are some internal properties which were introduced and used in the last years, and which were accessible from outside, but which were never supposed to be used from the user. They are either deprecated or removed. So if you want to handle or config something around your project root, use these properties in the future. Then I already said that modules are now called subprojects, and we don't only have the name change, but we have some smaller things here. Consistent timestamp about all subprojects. Yeah, very small thing, but it always looked somehow strange if you build multiple subprojects and they all have different timestamps, regardless of the fact that they were from the same build. And if what we all know is that if you build snapshot versions, the timestamp the artifact is built is in the file name. So you would expect that all artifacts of a multi-subproject project or a project with multiple subprojects should have all consistent timestamps, but this is not true in Maven 3, and Maven 4 is. Then it already said the default values for install and deploy at the end are now set to true, to be also more in line with, okay, only when the full build is successful, then we will publish them to your local repository or to a remote repository. And you can expect it from or guess it from the emoji there. Maven 4 introduced automatic versioning, and that's the point where I showed in the table before why you don't have to declare your project own dependency, or you don't have to fully declare them anymore. To be more precise, you don't have to define the parent version or the version of your project own dependencies. What does it mean? If you have a subproject declaration in Maven 3, we have the parent version, well, you have to hardcode the parent version for your parent. And for project own dependencies, you can make use of the project version variable or property, which is then resolved by Maven. Otherwise, you can also, of course, declare or hardcode the version. In Maven 4, you don't need the information because Maven can handle themselves. You see here, no version attack anymore, and for project-owned dependencies also. If you are the guy on your team which handles build pipelines and whatever, and this comes handy, like, okay, we now have only one place where we have to change the version number, and all places are automatically adjusted during the build, and you don't, oh, I changed the version number, 100 files changed. Yeah, thank you. Which comes to the new, or to the next chapter, the CI-friendly variables like revision, which were introduced in Maven 3.5 for the first time, are now automatically resolved. When they were introduced in Maven 3.5, this was not possible by Maven itself, and you need to also use the flatten Maven plugin. Maven flatten plugin, which literally does this before the Maven build starts. At least this part of the plugin isn't needed anymore. If this kills the whole flatten plugin, I don't know. I'm not sure. But at least the version resolving is handled by Maven itself. Another thing, especially also when you're responsible for the maintenance of your builds, is a fail on severity parameter. You can pass to your build to tell Maven or the build to break as soon as you get one log message on a certain log level. The default in Maven 3 and the only way to break your build via messages is error or exception. With these parameter, you can also say, okay, Maven, break the build if I get a warning somewhere. So especially when you now want to migrate to Maven 4 or want to maintenance your own Maven plugin, this comes very handy to make sure, okay, at least as soon as I get a warning, I want to break and then look at this particular thing. And as already said before, some of the current warnings in Maven 3.9 will break your build in Maven 4. So have a close look at them to be able to use Maven 4. And all the warnings you already get in Maven 3.9 you can fix today. So you can prepare. Another thing is a change lifecycle. If you look at the Maven lifecycle, it's literally a list of phases. This changed from a theoretical point that in Maven 4 it's a tree. Now you can argue, yes, a list is also a tree, but technically it's now a different thing. And this allows to define custom life cycles where you skip phases if you don't want them. Like you can skip the install phase and only deploy, or you can, I don't know, skip the unit test frame and only run integration tests or whatever. Obviously, there are some constraints, like you have to compile before you can run tests or whatever. And of course, the default lifecycle, as we know them for 25 years, still stays the same. But if you want to deep dive this and optimize min-maxing your build, you can define your own lifecycle. A more handy and more useful thing for the common developer, I would say, is that now each phase of the lifecycle has a declared or has a before and an after phase. Some of you might think about, okay, there were these pre and post phases. There were some kind of testing in this field because not every lifecycle phase has them, which lead to the fact that, okay, I want to hook into this pre-phase, literally. Oh, this does not exist. Okay, I hook into the post phase of the lifecycle phase before, if it only have it. So there were gaps, and they were not consisting. They were not even consistently in the same naming schema. These are all dropped or only used as an alias now for these phases. So every phase of the lifecycle now has a before phase and an after phase you can hook in with your plugins. If you want to do multiple things at the same phase, regardless of if before, after, or the main phase, you can also use priorities with numeric literals to say, okay, this execution must be run before a second execution. And you also, there were also phases introduced with the all in each phase on project level. So you can say, okay, I want to do something before every sub-project or project, or before all, and so whatever. When you look at the name before, after, or all each, you see that's the same naming as many testing frameworks do their hooks. And this is obviously designed by exactly this to make it more easily usable for the users. Another thing, optional profiles. Profiles, when you call a profile which does not exist, literally build breaks. You can now say that Maven, okay, this is an optional profile by using the quotation marks, and then it only shows an info that does not exist. So as a recap, Maven 4, minimum Java 17, separation of build and consumer POM, and a lot of minor improvements or user experience improvement like reactor, new lifecycle phases, automatic versioning properties, and of course more. I can't tell you everything, and because of this, and because the Dane team was asked this a lot, what's changed with Maven 4, we have written quite long, I would say, article on the Maven site where all the changes are listed with examples and a little bit of context maybe. So you can check this site. It's also linked from the landing page of the Maven site, which comes to the reason or the question, okay, how to migrate. If you want to do it, the recommendation from the Maven team is make sure that your Maven build runs successfully on Maven 3.9 with current up-to-date 3.0 plugins of the core plugins. When I speak about plugins here, I only can speak for Maven core or plugins maintained by the Maven core team. Prepare your build environment for Java 17 if you not have already done this. Even Maven 3 can run on Java 17, so maybe you're already doing this. For Maven 4, it's required. Then the third step, obviously, use Maven 4 and just check if your project which runs successfully on Maven 3.9 should run without any changes on Maven 4. I'm writing here maybe fix errors. These are then literally configuration errors you have in your Maven project, which are successfully executed by Maven 3, but might break on 4, like properties which are not available anymore. And then as an optional step, if you want to do use the final versions of 4.x plugins and use the Maven 4 exclusive features, like using features which require the model version 4.1. We also have a guide there, which will be extended with the more feedback we get from the community. So if you have problems or a good experience, tell us in the mailing list or social media so we can add them. And at best, you don't have to do this manually, because Maven also ships with an upgrade tool, which is built in Maven 4. And this has two modes. It can either update your Maven 3 or to your project to be still compatible to Maven 3. So literally only use features which are considering using Maven model 4.0. Or you can say, give me everything, I want to upgrade and use only Maven 4. Then it also introduce features of the new. And so last slide, first glance at Maven 4.1. Introduce another new model version, because we are introducing mixins, another feature many users are requesting since years. Those of you who are using Spring might have the problem that Spring has a parent POM, and then you're in an environment where the company also has a POM you should use as your parent POM, and then you're friggling them together. And mixings are literally, okay, we can combine plugin configuration from multiple parent POMs, and yeah, and other build improvements like improved project scheduling and multi-threads, making more usage of your cores and whatever is coming there. So, as already said, as of now, as of today, we still have release candidate 4, but final version should become in the next weeks. So, thank you. If you want to give feedback to the team, these are the mailing lists.
Thank you very much for this introduction of Maven 4. The features look pretty promising. And I don't think that my current project will be using that very soon, but I'm still looking forward to it. So, are there any questions regarding...
Don't be afraid. The Maven team is aware of the small changing environment and and is focusing on a high backward compatibility to Maven 3 and 3.9, or maybe a 3.10 in the future, and Maven 4. So making it easy for projects to migrate, but don't enforce them to do it, except they want the new features that are exclusive.
Yeah, so thank you. Are there any questions for Maven 4?
Okay, thank you very much. I'm just a bit curious, because you did a lot of things to get less confusions, but I've just got what confused me this whole time, because as I've read, okay, it's about the new Maven 4.0. I thought, am I not using 4.0 now? That's because now I see why. Because of the model version, the 3.9 uses 4.0 model version, and as I can have already seen that you're planning to do 4.2 as 4.1.
Yeah, this mistake was done about 20 years ago. Or you can argue this. Why does the model version doesn't align with the major version of Maven? Yeah, I can't tell you more about it. It was far before my Maven time myself. But on the other side, you could argue, okay, it's just a model. It's not the major version of Maven. I know it's confusing. I I decided some years ago to don't care about, or to don't build a relation about the model version of the POM and the Maven version, which is supported.
I've just recently heard about JUnit 6 update,
Yeah.
and they have aligned all the version numbers, just jumping over some
Yeah.
versions, or perhaps just as an idea, on some day just skip one of version and bring everything to the same.
Maybe it comes with Maven 5. Like this would be the next major version where you could align it. But then you also have to consider, okay, do we want to introduce things only in a model version 5, or do we also want to introduce it in 4. Whatever? Yeah, some say we shouldn't have a model version, at least in the namespace at all, only in an XML tag, which is obviously fixed to differentiate between the models. I also knew the alignment of the JUnit team, and they decided to align all the versions of their several projects or artifacts which are under the same umbrella, to make it easier for the users to see that these versions are compatible. On the other side, this is also a point I personally don't care about, because the Maven team, the JUnit team offers a BOM which handles all the version numbers of all their different artifacts. So there are some, these are decisions you do as a team in, okay, on which level do we want to show the users which parts of our applications are compatible. Because if Maven does the same for as the JUnit team, all the plugin and the plugin versions and all the tools which are used by the plugins and developed by the Maven team must be aligned in versions too. That would be the consequence of it. And so I think, and to be honest, I don't know the exact case why it was decided 20 years ago in Maven 2 to increase the model version higher than the major version, but it was done.
Small question regarding this topic. So has BOM and TOM already integrated into Maven, or are we going to get it in 4.9?
Sorry.
You mentioned BOM versioning so that you can have the same measure for different.
The idea or the concept of bill of materials you can also do in Maven 3. The only difference here in Maven 4 is that you have an explicit dependency or artifact type to declare from the outside. This is in bill of material and not a POM file containing build information, like plugin configuration or whatever.
But for this, we have to use some plugins that you mentioned, that like for tonal version as well.
This is the flatten plugin you mean on this is comes in place where you have to replace properties literally before the Maven build starts, because Maven can't handle it themselves, so or the Maven reactor, and this is where the plugin, the flatten plugin jumps in and does something Maven 3 can't handle itself, but needs the information before it runs. But these are different things. A bill of material, or let's start at the end. A POM, a file.pom or packaging time.pom, or a POM contains build information like plugin configuration, properties, whatever. A bill of materials contains dependency information, literally only a dependency management block with artifact dependency declaration and versions of these dependencies. So in your project where you use this bill of materials, you only declare the dependency and don't care about the version, because you know you have a bill of materials which is which ensures that the versions of the dependency declared on this bill of materials fit together. And for this, a new packaging type is introduced in Maven 4. to make it clear, okay, this is a bill of material.
Will this artifact type then, or POM type then will be handled differently than the POM type?
Technically, I think there is a small change, but from the user perspective, it's not.
So my question is, are there any plans how long Maven 3.9.x will be supported?
Nope.
So quite long, I suppose.
Yeah, quite long. I can't tell you how long. Obviously, it depends on how many people supporting Maven in terms of developing Maven and want to give support for 3.9. Literally every team member of Maven does this in their spare times. There are a small amount of people who are getting some money from a fund by the German government at the moment, but it's timely limited. So literally every team member of Maven does this in their spare time, like in many open source projects. So it's always a matter of how much do they care about their users. And the Maven team does care about their users a lot, because they have shown the last 25 years that they don't introduce new features breaking the old versions. Literally, the Maven 4 is, except the break or the jump from Maven 1, which were a very early version in terms of getting experience with build project, that's all. There were breaking changes between Maven 1 and Maven 2, introducing, for example, a new Maven Central. But then Maven 4 is the first version introducing breaking changes, or introducing changes you would call breaking changes.
So, thank you very much. If there are no more questions, I guess Matthias will also be around for some more minutes.
Yes, some more minutes, but I have to go in about half an hour to get my car out of the parking lot.
So you'll still have a couple of minutes to talk
Yeah,
to
sure.
him.
And if I'm not there or you have questions tomorrow, ask the users mailing list. You will get answers there.
So, thank you everyone for being here. It was fun having you here, especially having you here giving the talks, because otherwise it would be a bit boring. And